We're here to solve this different Tapa. The first thing to recognize is with a region with 4 cells, which can either be on or off. There are 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 or 16 options, but one of them has all 16 or all 4 cells shaded, which is impossible given the Tapa 2x2 rule. So we're left with 15 options, and there are 15 of these regions in the grid to fill. So we're gonna have to use each of these once. Notice the fully empty box, 4 single cells, 4 3 cells, and 6 that use 2 cells, and these 2 ones which will at least have some connectivity challenges. The rest of these look pretty good for using a Tapa, maybe with corners and things, but these will certainly be a break of the Tapa. So besides the way the different rule plays out, there's a lot of just the structure of clues in a Tapa puzzle, which is a great place to start in this grid. The original clues in this puzzle are actually these 16, sort of these center vertices between these boxes, but you see that in my construction I actually ended up relying on these diagonals, and those really isolate the grid. And further, the values on these extremes that are 2s mean I can't get the Tapa fully through these columns. So for connectivity reasons, this side is isolated. Similarly, I can't get the Tapa cleanly through here. And around this clue, this 1 1 1 clue, the Tapa can't extend for more than 2 cells. So what I intended to be the Tapa break-in, just from looking at the grid, is that these 3 cells have to be shaded to get connectivity from this side of the grid to the center of the grid. And then because of how this corner is also broken out, this is going to have to snake up the center to stay fully connected. So let's see how that plays out. First, as we complete around this clue, the 2 3 has just one option left for it at this point. That very quickly gives us the 4. This 3 can no longer use these 3 cells because it would have too many shaded right around here, so it's going to end up taking these 3 cells, which finishes this clue. We can do a little bit of the extension here to this 4 clue, and then this 2 takes this, comes in. So this is sort of how we get the start on all of this side. We do still need to be connected, and this 2 2 clue can't have the Tapa coming straight through this. So one of the things that means is that this is a choke point cell and has to be shaded. It's worth seeing that around this 1 1, first, the empty cell of a 3 3 clue is going to be one of these, and if you know how 3 3 clues work, they have 2 empty cells which are opposite the given cells. So the first thing I see is that I can shade these 4 and think about the remaining options. If the unused are in these cells and the Tapa goes like this, what you'll see is we've actually isolated the top of the group from the bottom of the group. And so there's only one real option around the 3 3, which is this one. The next trickier point to see is actually around this 1 1 clue, and it's talking to this 2 4. So there's a way this clue speaks to this one and also speaks to this one. The 2 4 also has 2 unused cells. They have to be at least 2 apart. Notice that one of the unused cells is going to be here, and so there are no ways to fill this clue out that don't use these as shaded cells, because if this is unused, then either this cell or the other unused. If this is unused, then either this or this cell or the other unused. So the other thing to note is that this, the other of these 2 cells is going to be shaded, and that will fill out this clue. So we can actually mark these 2 cells, and this is not as common a Tapa step, but if you're very good in Tapa, you'll start to see these deductions quicker. These are unused, and that actually gives us very quickly the full 2 2 set. And shading that in gives us our first fully completed region. So I'm gonna, for my own purposes, box them when I log them, so I won't forget that I've seen them and cross them off over here. We mark around this clue, these cells. It's worth seeing that this 3 can no longer take cells starting from here or from here. That would lead to a 2 by 2 group down here, so it at most takes this. That means that the 6 can't take all of these 3 cells. and how this communicates. So at least one of these cells is unused, and what that means is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That the two that are connected are either these are unused, these are unused, these are unused, or these unused, and these three get fully shaded. The next place I guess we can start to use our shape rules. We actually have already used the 3 cells like this, so this is an unshaded cell, and fully complete then this bottom one. For connectivity, look and see that this cell has to be used. There's no other way to corner into this bottom group, and it is isolated, so shading this uses another full set. Can then do some inferential deductions, but one example is if this is not shaded, then the top is going to come to the right because of this clue comes immediately down. You'll see that repeats the shape. So, you don't actually have to do this very tricky or unusual kind of deduction, but it's something that this puzzle allows. You can certainly look over here to extend into the rest of the grid. This has to come down one, and that does indeed complete another shape. That now tells us this cell isn't used because we'd be repeating the shape. We don't yet know, because both of the options are there, what this cell is doing from that kind of logic, but we'll get there soon enough. Next place to do some kind of interesting things is around here. There are 3 cells that need to be shaded. You could take one here and one here, but you have to take at least one of these. Notice that whichever one you take is going to use up the rest of the clue. So there's exactly one here, there's exactly one here, and this cell is used. What we should now consider is if this cell is the one that's shaded versus this one here. If that's shaded, you're going to get to a situation like this. We already used this shape and this shape, and so there's no option that's going to allow that to work. So of the 2 options here, the 2 takes these, which lets us complete the 4 as a starting point. There are a few different things we can do now. I'm going to come back to the top where this 5 has a lot of cells that are shadable, since it now has just 6 options left to it. You do have to worry about connectivity of these cells into this grid, and there's sort of a few options for the 3, but we may or may not need to use this cell. It's worth thinking about how the 4-1 will sit here. One other thing you can do, though, and this is potentially one of the harder sticking points of the puzzle, but it's where it was critical to do things around this too, to start finding the hardest patterns to place. And right now, the hardest pattern to place by far is this one with the upper left and lower right shaded. Can't go here because you'd have an isolated cell. It can't go here because the cell here can't connect. It's none of these. It could be this one. It's not here, here, here. It can't be here because that's isolated. It can't be here, that's isolated. It's not this, it's not this. It can't be here, it doesn't connect. And if it is up here, and this is the other option we have to consider, the 4, this 1-4 can't be used. So actually one cell I should mark. This has to be shaded for a 1-4 around here. So the concept that this puzzle would eventually get to unique mapping of these groups is possible right now, and it's possible with just this one shape and just this one square at the top. But seeing that will get us quick progress. In particular, it now isolates these, so we know this has to come over. For connectivity, this has to come here and up. We'll see that neither of these can be shaded because those cells would map to either of these patterns. So we have this top option instead. The 4 has to use at least this cell. It can't start here, so it's going to start there. So this is 1 on, 1 off, and the rest go around. We do have to get this Tapa, the Tapa is going to come this way, has to stay connected. So for connection, it's going to go like this. And for connectivity, it's going to continue like this. So that gives us all of these and all mark the things we've identified. This one, it can't be shaded, so it actually is just 2 vertical on the right side, which helps us mark some more that are complete. We still have a fair bit to do, but having now completed this based on pattern matching, you can see that this cell isn't usable, and so the only one left in the state is the one I've just shaded, and that's going to quickly force these, which completes the last of the 3 cell groups. We do now have to think critically about how this last option is going to be filled in here. But before doing that, I can go back to pattern matching, and the other of the diagonal choices we talked at the start would be tough, is going to be impossible to place, except in one spot here. It can't go here, it can't go here. These are all determined, it can't go here. Here it would get isolated, it has to sit here. We have to use the center cell to come around, and of the options left for this corner, it's going to have to take this tight corner. None of these others get around. It has to touch to these spots, so we can logically force this based on the available options left. This still has some choices, this still has some choices. This is harder to place, and again, now is at a spot where it has just one option, which is here. One thing that actually does is finishes this whole clue and sets it up so it has to extend down for connectivity. That now actually says none of these cells are reached, and so at the same time we get this one, we get the full blank one. We now have either this single cell or this one with 2 cells as an option here, but note that the one for here can't be just the lower left corner, so it has to connect up. That forces this shape here and this shape here. And all the shapes are determined, and everything left in the puzzle now is just getting connectivity of these groups here. It used that cell would be disconnected, so it uses this one and this one. And we finished this different Tapa. Somewhat difficult puzzle, but it did use Tapa rules at the start, and this is where, if you haven't started to do this more, how clue patterns, particularly tight diagonals or isolated regions of the grid, can give connectivity. Things of just how clues next to each other, like this one next to these. So this is a very light clue in terms of shading. This is a very heavy clue in terms of shading with just a single set of unused cells, single set of unused cells. Like this communication is something that really helped us get through the middle and steer a lot of the stuff. And then it used the variation rules, particularly the isolated options for this pattern, some of the other work to get through it. So it went back and forth in styles, and it's a worthy Saturday puzzle, but hope you learned a little bit about how I constructed and intended the solution of this puzzle to go, and see you again soon.